Wow, look at all the youth. There's a lot of them also. Cool. Plugged in starting now. Simba and Barbara Pufajena, you may or may not know them. If you've been around River of Life for any length of time, you will know them. They lead the Michael Project, which is a River of Life ministry that works with orphans and vulnerable children. And they've done a brilliant job over the last, is it 4 years? 5 years?
5 years.
5 years at the Rock. So they've done 12 at Kids Work. But these guys are full-time. So this is what they do. They're an amazing advocate for orphans and vulnerable children. I'll tell you why. Because not only do they lead the Michael Project and do all of that, they have 2 adopted children themselves, which they won't tell you about. But they're beautiful children. They're lovely and they're raising them. So they're in the adoption process, but they also lead it. And so I'm delighted for them to share what's been happening in the Michael Project, testimonies, and I trust you enjoy that. Simba, go for it.
Thank you very much.
Shall we give them a hand?
So what was cool about that introduction is he took out like half of what I was going to say about us. So I can go straight to when we are not leading the Michael Project and not stressing about why the homework of our 2 kids is so intense. We're trying to carve out time to finally go and watch Wakanda Forever. Before any one of you guys that's already watched it, come and just whisper in our ears and spoil it for us. So if you do see us at any point, please don't mention anything about the plots or any of the subplots. So that's who we are. We've been serving for quite a while, but our interaction with the Michael Project actually started about 10 years ago, when as a couple, desperate to adopt, we were just searching, trying to figure out what's the next step, and there was absolutely little information out there. And then we stumbled upon a workshop that the Michael Project was facilitating. And then they facilitated, assisted us. Fast forward to 2022. We've got those 2 children struggling with their homework, but also serving faithfully, helping other people figure out and fill in those blanks for themselves. What I'm hoping you would have figured out as well about our church, River of Life, by now is that we love children and we love families. And as a ministry of River of Life Church, Michael Project is no different. These 2 elements actually merge and create a sweet spot from where we operate most of our things out of. And everything just hinges on one little phrase, that children belong in families. So if you've been tracking with us as we've been presenting at each of the different Love Lives Here Sundays throughout the year, first term, does anyone remember what the first R was about? Remain. And Remain, we serve that through our preschools, 3 of them that are located in disadvantaged communities, and these help these children remain with their birth family so that they're not sent off Kumusha or somewhere else whilst their parents are somewhere in the urban areas trying to earn a living. The next R, which was profiled in the second term, I will not ask for it, I'll give it to you. Okay, Dave. Regain, not quite. Other one. Reunify, excellent. Reunify, facilitated through the children's home that we run in Shalom, which is in Marlborough, but we've transitioned that actually into a transitioning home so that we don't keep children unnecessarily in that institutional sort of care. So we're transitioning them out so that they can be reunified with their families of origin. The last one, which Dave has already given us, is Regain. And it's perfect because every child, like we said, belongs in a family. Circumstances could get them to leave a family, and through those first hours, they somehow need to get back to that family. But there are some circumstances where those first 2 options are not available for them. And that then leads us to this particular one, the one we're going to profile today, which is Regain. And when we're talking about regaining a family, the 2 options that are available are that fostering in a short-term sort of capacity or even in a long-term capacity, and ultimately even right through to the option of adoption. What is even better about today is that we're not only doing it in a local context of a brilliant family service. We are joining with thousands of churches across the globe in what is traditionally known as Orphan, and for Zimbabwe and River of Life, also Stand Sunday. And this is an initiative that is coordinated globally every year on the second Sunday of November, just to raise the awareness of what is happening in that space for orphaned and vulnerable children, and how the church is leading initiatives in the community to alleviate that stress and bring those children back home. So that's what is happening. So you may be sitting there and just thinking, I came to a church service, a family service, but all of us are part of something huge. Hands up if you believe that. I see some hands. That's fine. Hopefully by the time we get to the end of the service, more hands will be going up. So I'd like us to start by turning to the book of Nehemiah. If you can turn with me, chapter 2, verses 17 to 18. It's coming up on your screens. And it reads, "Then I said to them, you see the bad situation that we are in, how Jerusalem is desolate and lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, so that we will no longer be a disgrace." Then I told them how the hand of God had been favorable to me, and also about the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, "Let us rise and build." So they thoroughly supported the good work. I chose the amplified version of that scripture because of that particular line. So they thoroughly supported the good work. And at this point, I'm sure some of you are thinking, orphan care, vulnerable children, construction, building. Where does this all intersect, Simba? It doesn't make sense. But actually, from our perspective, it makes perfect sense. Because just as Nehemiah went and inspected and saw the desolation and all that had perished, from a micro-project perspective, we feel the same. Even when God is calling us in James 1, verse 27, to look out for orphans in the time of their distress. As we are looking out at those orphans in their time of distress, some of the things that become apparent is that the situation is desolate, the situation is in ruins, and a lot of that is because that wall that all of them are initially born into has crumbled down. That wall of family is gone. So what we are then calling the church to do is to figure out how we can rebuild, not just the wall, but those families around those children as well. The problem sometimes with that scripture in James is that it leaves us with a sense of knowing what we're supposed to do, but it doesn't always give us how we're supposed to do it, which then creates like a big gray area. And within that gray area, people have started to do lots of things, lots of great initiatives. Some of them are brilliant. Some of them we employ ourselves at the Micro Project, and some of you are part of that. But ultimately, what we've discovered is that unless those initiatives are somehow linking back and facilitating that these children get back into family, they're always going to fall short. And I think we saw it with the skit that was brilliantly presented by the Roll Kids. That child, on the face of it, had everything: clothed, fed, wasn't even excited about pizza. Something was missing until he got to regain a family. And that's the journey that a lot of these children find themselves on, some of them in limbo for long sorts of periods of time. And that journey is a journey that we ourselves as a church have been part of. 5 years ago, if you can believe it, we had 5 weeks in July. That was 2017. Initially, it was supposed to be maybe 2 weeks. The service was supposed to be Love Lives Here. That was what the series was called. It ended up being 5 weeks, because at every time when the planning was happening, we got to see just how much of that desolation was around us. And previous years, we had been coming up time after time, having an Orphan Sunday, raising awareness, participating in whichever ways we were doing it, but it was mostly from a distance, which is great, but still was not facilitating what these children needed. So what we had then decided at that time was it was now time for the church to act. So those 5 weeks have then propelled us in these 5 years on a different trajectory. There's a time when I remember we came into church and we just put ribbons on a clothesline, 35 ribbons. And those 35 ribbons were meant to represent the 35 lives of children that are abandoned in Harare monthly. That was 2017. We are not sure if those numbers have dipped or gone up, but still, at any point, if 35 children are being abandoned in Harare alone in a month, that's cause for alarm. The number of institutions that are in place are not enough, and that's never supposed to be the plan. Because God's plan, we believe, and I'm sure you believe as well, is that children belong in families. So that happened, and at the end of it, a call was left to the church, similar to the call that Nehemiah gave to those people. Come, let us rebuild. Thankfully, River of Life responded. With every person over the last 5 years that has signed up and stepped into different situations and facilitated for care, we have started to change the narratives of some of those ribbons that we had hung up. And this is how. Barbara will take us through that.
Hi, everyone. So we followed up the Love Lives Here series in 2017 with a 20 in 2020 challenge. That happened in 2020, where we were hoping to sign up at least 20 families who would become foster parents, short-term foster parents for children in need. So we did not quite meet that target, but out of that challenge, we had 6 families that followed the process through and committed to become short-term foster parents for babies, particularly babies in need. And so far, we have had 10 babies since 2020 who were placed with foster families from this church. And out of those 10 families, we had 6 babies that were adoptable. Now, when I say adoptable, I'm saying that a child has got no traceable references whatsoever. They become adoptable. And each of those babies has been adopted as I speak. And one of the reasons why it is possible, or why it has become possible that they were adopted, is because the foster families actually become advocates for these children. And they're in constant communication with authorities, with Michael Project, saying, what is the plan for this child? Have you found a family for this child? And that doesn't happen when a child goes into an institution, because when they go into the system, they're likely overlooked and their case becomes forgotten. So that is the importance of foster families. That is the importance of people signing up to become adoptive families. You become advocates for children. And when we ran this challenge, there was one family who were one of the first ones to actually sign up. And I'm glad that they are here today to just share their experience and how they were instrumental in ensuring that the children who came into their care actually ended up in forever families. So please, may you help me welcome the Smith family as they share their journey with us.
Thank you so much, Barbara. As she said, we're the Smith family. I'm Scott. This is my beautiful wife, Dusty. This is my very tall, beautiful daughter, Mia. We have 2 big boys. We've been parents for 23 years. Our boys have left home already. So that's just where we've come from. So, Dusty.
We've always been passionate about adoption and things like that. And then, like Barbara said, we followed through. Eventually, we went and we registered. I phoned Rayfat and said, we really want to register. And we got registered. They came and they did a home visit. And then they okayed us as foster parents. And then, so we've had 2 little babies come through our home. We opted to have newborn babies. We're so passionate about them, and they're just so cute. Both of our babies have been adopted, and it was a journey. It was beautiful, and there were tears, and it was just such a joy. I think the whole family gathered around. There was always what somebody would feed. Like, there were nights where I was just really tired. I would go to bed, and Jared, he was still with us. He's gone to uni now. He would stay up later. So he would take care of the babies and then bring them to me at about 9 o'clock for their next feed. And then I'd be able to catch a couple of hours sleep then. Some of my most heavenly moments, I can say, are with those babies late at night, just in the dead of the night when everybody else is sleeping and you're staring into this little person's eyes. And there's just something about God in that moment that I can't describe. And the love that you get, you're like, what are we going to do with these babies? But the love for them is almost instant, and you get this passionate protectiveness about those babies that come through your home. They become yours for that season. And we're very privileged to still be in touch with the babies who've been adopted. And actually, one of the families was with us yesterday afternoon, and that's a huge privilege. Also, people in the church who gathered around us. My prayer partner was so faithful and encouraging. Claire and Barbara in particular, I'd always breastfed. I didn't know what to do with bottles, so that was a whole journey and transition. And we were worried about provision, but within 2 days of having our baby, we had camp cots and prams, we had car seats, we had clothes, everything arrived. We didn't have to go out and buy stuff. Everything arrived, and like God fully prepared us for that baby, both babies. And
so I'm the younger sibling, and I always wanted to have a little brother or sister, and my parents were always like, no, we're too old, we can't have a sibling. So it was actually my first day of real high school, and that's the ugly foot over there. I had just done cross country, and my brother came to fetch me. I was like, why isn't Mom here? And he was like, can't tell you. So I got home, and Mom had this little baby, and my heart just opened. And I never thought that I could love someone that much. And then we had this baby for 2 weeks, and she was just the most beautiful thing. And I was so happy because I always wanted a little sibling to dress up. So yeah. And when she left, I was super upset, and I was like, I can't love anyone like that. And then the next year, we got another baby, and my heart just opened again. And I was so blessed to have these little siblings in my life. And yeah, I think I'll always have a place for them in my heart. Yeah.
So I could never understand adoption, and I could never understand how, it's a different thing to love your own children, and I thought it could be very hard to love another child, a child that isn't your own. But as you can hear from Mia and the family, they were both girls. The girls got into her heart very quickly, and I can understand and I can fully see God's hand in adoption and God's will, and I can understand how you can love a child that isn't your own child with as much as love as your own child. I just wanted to read from Romans 8:15 for you, because adoption is part of God's plan. And actually, every single one of us is adopted. None of us are naturally born God's children. We're all adopted into his family. And it says, for you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. So we are all adopted and we're all heirs. And very often with these things, you think, oh, we're going to help a child. But I want to just tell you that we're the ones who've been blessed by the girls. And, we still continue to be blessed by them. We had little Angel with us yesterday, and she's the most amazing child. And to see her in a forever family, and not the horrible thought of leaving her in an institution or whatever, is just really amazing. So thank you for all your support, everybody who helped us, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve and bless these girls. Thanks.
Wow, what a beautiful testimony. And even as we watched the skit that The Rock did earlier, you realize that nobody has the time, nobody has the money, no one has space. And sometimes you may even feel that you might not even have the love. But giving children, families, giving them a home is what God calls us to do. Nehemiah, when he heard that the walls of Jericho lay in ruins and that the gates had been burned by fire, he prayed and he asked God what he should do. And when he realized that God wanted him to go back and rebuild, he was afraid. In Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 2, it says, I was terrified. That's because he was the cupbearer to the king, and he didn't know how to tell the king that he needed to go back and rebuild. And so he prayed again. And when you're thinking about opening up your home to someone else, opening up your heart to someone else, you may be filled with fear. We certainly were when we started this journey 8 years ago. And when we brought our daughter home, we were plagued with fear. I mean, could we love a child who was not biologically ours? That was the paramount fear. I was afraid that my family might not accept my child. My parents already had like 16 or so grandchildren by the time my daughter came home. And I thought to myself, would my mom look at my daughter the way she looked at her biological grandchildren? I was very afraid. You can be afraid that this child might reject you. What if they want to look for their birth parents later on in life? What will you do? How are they going to turn out? The unknown is terrifying. But Nehemiah, when he was afraid, he prayed. And I'm urging you, church, if you're feeling like God is calling you to open up your heart and your home to a child, pray about it. And when Nehemiah prayed, he did not let fear paralyze him. He prayed and then he acted. So pray and then act. And when they started rebuilding the temple, when they started rebuilding the walls, in Nehemiah chapter 4, they faced some opposition led by two gentlemen, Sanballat and Tobiah. And these gentlemen started saying things about them. What do these feeble Israelites think, these Jews, what do they think they can do? Do they think they can build this wall? Do they think they can finish? Look at the wall. There was one verse that actually said, even if a fox went up on it, it will just crumble. And so they were trying to discourage them. And sometimes when you embark on this journey, we've encountered people who've come to us to say, I want to, but then this is what my family is saying. So the family can say, so you think you have so much money that you now want to solve the world's problem. What is one person going to do? Have you looked at all the problems that are plaguing our family? Suddenly you want to take in strangers? These are some of the things that people can say, and they can be well-meaning. My father-in-law, I remember then when we had talked to him about wanting to adopt, he said to us, maybe you guys are moving too fast. Just take a little bit of time. Why don't you wait a few years and see how you feel then? And I'm sure he felt like he was being helpful. But these are some of the things that you may encounter when you are trying to embark on this journey. And like Nehemiah did not falter. When people were discouraging him, they kept on building. There were even threats. They were threatened with death. And what Nehemiah did, he did not stop building. What he just did is he divided his workforce in two and had half the people building, the other half were protecting the builders. And so my encouragement to you is just to say, do not give up. Do not get discouraged. Nothing worth doing is easy. This is what God is calling us to do. But of course you face opposition. But you just need to pray and find strength in God. Whatever you feel you don't have, God is our sufficiency. We find it in Christ. And you may be sitting there thinking, well, what sort of families? We've seen the Smiths, there are other families in here, the Coopers are here, and they're also foster families. What type of families do this, Are they like us? Are they different? I have a short clip that I just want to share of families, some of the families who have decided to grow their families through adoption and foster care. And just so that you can see that these are just ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Let's take a look.
What if I find home when I'm with you? A place where dreams come true. When the sun ain't shining, the light will still come through the windows of the home when I'm with you. A place where dreams come true. Home when I'm with you. Home when I'm with you. All by grace, I have found that there's a way to trust and believe for brighter days. Even when it's not easy, I can still know in the arms of God's love, I'm
So I could share countless stories of the tragic lives or past that these children that have come through the Michael Project have already experienced. I could share a story of a girl who was raped by her own father, only 5 years old, who is in need of a family. One who is a product of statutory rape. She is 6, needing a family. One whose parents are in jail, and the stigma surrounding that whole case prevented the family from taking that child in. Children who have been completely abandoned. You have people who leave children in shopping malls in the dead of night, in maize fields. Children who are in need of a family. I could tell you stories of how this church has come together with prayer, with donations financially, material donations, fuel, that has allowed the Michael Project to be able to start looking for families for these children. I could tell you of a girl who was at Shalom for over 10 years, but is now reunited with her paternal uncle and aunt. Of children who were abandoned, and after 6 months at the Michael Project at Shalom, were able to be adopted. One child whose mom had been in jail, and after she left jail, she completely disappeared. But because of the support and the love and prayers from this church, we were able to trace an uncle who then took in the child in within 24 hours. They had no idea where this child was, but we managed to track them down, and they were reunified. So there are countless stories of how the church has come together and has changed the trajectory of these children's lives, changed a whole generation. So thank you so much for all that you do. We are certainly better together.
Very true. And as Scott was mentioning that all of us are adopted, it just made me remember another phrase that is usually shared in this space, where it says that for those of us that will step into that and invite a child home, it's actually just facilitating an opportunity of having the gospel playing itself out in our living rooms, because that's exactly what we are being called to do. The same mess that we sometimes think we can shrink away from because it's going to get tough and hard and whatever, or emotionally draining. I think what encourages us to push through is the fact that when we look at the example that Christ left for us, he didn't, from his vantage point in heaven, look down and think, nails, whips, and all of that. He thought we were worth it then. He still thinks we are worth it now. And similarly, all of these children are worth it. If I was to tell you that of the children that were part of the skit, 2 of them are from a hard place, would you believe me? And that's the point. They're all children. We're not supposed to look at them. Some of them will have unique situations and circumstances to overcome, but we just want to provide a situation that just equalizes them and allows them to be children. And we cannot do that if all of our interventions fall short and do not provide the one thing that they're ultimately lacking, which is family. And not just any family, but a forever family. And our definition of a forever family is any family where, 1, the child feels like they want to belong forever. 2, also importantly, the family feels like they want this child to belong forever. That's it. And is it going to be perfect? No. Similarly, when you look at the font on the front of those T-shirts, they've got cracks in them. That's just a display that we're not expecting everybody to have everything all collected and sorted, and you're a billionaire and you've got a 40-foot mansion and stuff, and you've got cribs and whatever. What we are saying is, as much as the cracks are there and you're working on them, it's solid enough as you can look at it and see that this is a structure in which a baby can come in and feel loved, chosen, or even ultimately adopted. And that becomes their forever family. So that's what we are calling people to do. So as we are finalizing, can I just call up anyone that has got a Michael Project T-shirt on? Please come, stand from that end, as many as you can fit up front, as quickly as you can. And whilst they're getting up, I will read again in Nehemiah. So Nehemiah, we've already read, has looked at this situation. It's desolate, it's in ruins, and the people have come and it's been thoroughly supported. And then it goes to chapter 3, where there's a recollection of the people that actually built this wall. And I'm just going to paraphrase it from Nehemiah 3, and it says, "The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and then Zaccur, son of Imri, built next to them. In another section, repairs were made by men from Gibeon and Mizpah, Melatiah of Gibeon, and Jadon of Meronoth." Note to self, Simba, next time pick a section that has not got all these difficult names. But going on. "Places under the authority of governor of the Trans-Euphrates. Uziel, son of Hariah, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the next section. And Hananiah, one of the perfume makers, made repairs next to that. They restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall." Now, I don't know how many of you have been in construction, but I don't think anytime they're advertising on vacancies, they say, "Wanted perfume expert," and knows how to work well with goldsmiths under pressure. It's never a pre-requirement, but somehow, for this particular call that God was calling them on, they found a fit. And with these guys standing side by side without leaving any gap, this is what we are calling each other out to do. Because it's going to be difficult, we're going to rub each other the wrong way, but for as long as we stay focused on what we are being called to do, I believe that we can actually make strides. And going back to what that skit was about, initially, that same stage had one child that was struggling. That child was eventually paired up with a family. But the story shouldn't end there, and this is why. You'll be sitting there and you're thinking, fine, we've seen the images, we've seen the illustrations. What happens next? We've got sections that we think each of us are being called to participate in. And similar to how that passage in the scripture states the different backgrounds and the different skill sets and the different qualifications that came together for this one particular thing, it shows that we're not calling one person or a few people to do absolutely everything, nor are we calling the few people to do just the same thing. But what we are asking is that everyone finds at least one thing to do and do it faithfully on this whole continuum of care. And that continuum of care will look like this. This is where you can find out how you are supposed to help. The first thing is to thank all the people, like Barbara has already mentioned, that have helped on this journey and brought us to the stage that we're at. And you're still thinking, do I tap out now? No. Why? Because we still need to rebuild. There's still children being born. There's still children being abandoned. And we still need to make sure that what we've strengthened remains strengthened, and we extend that without leaving any gaps. The first option of how you can build is on a place of safety, foster care, or adoption. So in a broad sense, you'll fall into one of two categories. You will either be a caregiver, that's the group that these people will be a part of who are inviting the children in, or you'll be a care facilitator, similar to what Bob said, some were guarding, some were building. So it's all about teamwork at the end of the day. Each one is important in whatever they're doing. So for those of you that are sitting here and you're continuing to be stirred, the opportunity is there at the end of the service for you to sign up at the information table and then participate with us, and we'll go through all the A, B's, and C's of how you can get involved and offer that family-based intervention for children in need of care. The next thing that you will need to do, and these ones are all on this form over here, which is also going to be available at the Information Hub, is prayer. It's been mentioned several times, and we can testify to the fact that over those 5 years, there are certain things that we thought were impossible, and we put on prayer lists in hope, and God showed up and showed off. And now we've got 500 people that get a prayer diary on a monthly basis and pray into situations that are unique to those children and the families that are needing the support. So we need more people to get on board on that one. And then the other one is people with giftings that can serve as a practical assistance team member. Some of them have already started to do it. Today, you'll have an opportunity to purchase some of their cakes, which they've donated, so that as we do the cake sale at the end of the service, the funds can help to also fund the Michael Project. But you could also be sitting there with other skill sets, therapists, lawyers, medical practitioners, teachers, anyone that is required by any family at any point in time. We'll be able to find someone that might require your skills. A lot of the people that do pass through our workshops eventually find unique situations that they struggle with. But if we've got, as a body, people that are able to either donate that time or subsidize it, that's another way that you can help to build. You can also partner as a corporate. The call is not only as individuals, because even in that story of Nehemiah, he got a lot of supplies from neighboring areas. So you could bandy together, you could be at the top of your corporation and able to facilitate that. Or you could play matchmaker and just say, from what I heard this Sunday, I think you guys need to speak to so-and-so and help all of these children. You could also be part of the Pledge Squad. The Pledge Squad is the group of people that have signed up usually for about a year and regularly give us financial or in-kind support, things that keep the ministry running. And it can be anything, any amount, as long as it's faithfully honored at the end of the day, it helps. And in this particular situation, the courses and the workshops that we offer are still free. And that's because they're being subsidized by some of the funds that come from people that have been doing so. So for us to be able to do more, would need more people to jump on board and facilitate that. And finally, profiling. All of these people have already started doing it. I forgot to say it earlier, but all of you that came wearing your Michael Project t-shirts, thank you very much. You understood the assignment. And this is why. These are not just t-shirts. They look swanky. What do they call them these days? Drip. Yeah. And we had asked for influencers and message bearers. And the message that each of them are carrying is something that we are wanting to step towards normalizing. So imagine as you're going now back into your world, going to shopping and whatever, without having to say anything, you are saying a lot. You are actually encouraging people to be the light, stand with families for children as they transition into their forever families. And this is what we are asking you to do as we normalize fostering and adoption in Zimbabwe. So as they're standing there, I want you to remember where that little boy stood. Imagine if that story hadn't ended there. If in front of him, he saw a wall like this of people that are standing side by side without leaving any gaps as part of a wall that continues to be built. That means that for the other person that's seeing that, the child's faith rises. For the next family that sees the support that Dustin and Scott spoke about, the next family also gets strengthened. If we as a church start to look at other churches that are replicating what we are doing and doing things that are different, we look at them and think, actually, think of what God can continue to do through us. So it's actually a team sport that requires all of us to come from the terraces and play our part. That is the way that we'll enter this next season that the Christian Alliance for Orphans is calling for, which will see every child in a loving family embraced in a collaborative community. That is how we are wanting to proceed, and only with all of us banding together can we do this, because ultimately, for the sake of these children, we are better together. Thanks, guys.